All right, guys, we're back on the Next Level Agents podcast, and I'm excited for today's episode. Returning guest, my friend Debbie. Debbie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Kevin, for inviting me.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to have you come back. I was talking with Jessica on your staff not too long ago, and she told me about a new course that you came up with, an on-demand negotiations like masterclass. And I was
Yes.
thinking like there could not be a better time, number one, for this course. And so I just thought timing wise, like we've got to get Debbie back on the podcast because I think with all the changes we have going on in the industry, with the way the commission structures and everything are changing, I think now more than ever, understanding negotiations at a high level is super important. So I was really glad to see that you were doing this, and also glad that you decided to come back on the podcast today.
Yeah. We actually, my business partner, Ben Kinney, who's co-founder of Forward Coaching, and many of you listening probably know Ben or have watched him somewhere on YouTube. And then, of course, the amazing Chris Suarez, who I think is one of the smartest men when it comes to discussing negotiations and persuasion. We all got together a couple of months ago and we said, it's going to be a little bit of a scary change. And some agents have never really had to do the deep negotiation that some of the veterans listening may have had to do, because it's just been that kind of weird market where sellers asked what they wanted and buyers paid what they wanted, right? And now we've really got to get deep in the weeds. And even for us who've been around for a long time, we may have gotten a little bit rusty, right? And we need to brush up those skills. And that's why we thought we'll put this masterclass together. It's 12 modules. We are going to sell it in a couple of months, but we thought in the meantime, we wanted to give it as our gift to the entire real estate industry. So for your listeners, since we can't pop up a link and all of that stuff, if they just write down forwardcoaching.com/negotiations. So forwardcoaching.com/negotiations, that's going to take you to a link, and that's going to give you access to this course. And even though we know it's 12 weeks, 12 modules, some of you may want to go faster, so you can. You can watch them as quickly as you'd like. But if you feel like, oh my gosh, I've got a vacation, too much going on, learning my new forms, well, we've given you not just 12 weeks, but an additional 45 days to be able to be in that portal. And there is no strings attached. And Kevin, I really want to stress that. We did this from the thought that we're going to all have to collaborate. We're going to have to work together at a much higher level in discussing concessions and helping buyers get into homes and what will sellers do. So totally free, no strings attached.
I love that. That's one of the things I love. I consider both Ben and Chris to be friends, and I'm certainly a lot closer with Ben and have been for a number of years. But Chris also too is one of those guys that just he understands human psychology at a really high level, which is super important when we're
Yes.
talking about these things, right? And I think obviously you and Ben both understand this really well too. Let me ask you, give me a brief overview of what can participants expect to learn from the course. So let's say I sign up for it today and I'm going to go through the next 12 weeks and I'm going to just take this on. What can I expect to realistically walk away from that course with?
So it's not, if you're thinking, oh, we're going to talk about negotiating commission and negotiating concessions, we're not going to do that, because that is very, not just the NAR rules, but very much in your local state, your state and your local MLS. There's different tweaks on that. So you're going to have to work with your broker, work with your state. What I really wanted to go into, though, is more the high level aspects, like how do I communicate more effectively? How do I recognize and understand how to sell appropriately to my customer based on their personality style? How do I handle really difficult, aggressive negotiation situations? Because I think sometimes, Kevin, when you think of being a master negotiator, you might think of it like, I got to play hardball. I got to be aggressive. Some of you listening are thinking, that's just not me. I don't want to do that. But the good news is the best negotiators really have a collaborative technique. So it's not about being a hammer. It's not about being super aggressive. It's really about being flawless and putting the pieces together and saying and doing the right things at the right time. So I think of it as the art of communication, the art of resolving conflict, how to sell more with less stress, and have these people so happy that they give you 5-star reviews.
Yeah, I love that. Why do you, besides that last one, I think the last one could be an answer to the question I'm about to ask you, but I'm going to ask you anyways. But why do you believe negotiation skills are so critical for professionals in the real estate industry?
Well, someone really smart, he actually was the ex CEO of realtor.com. He said, Debbie, when you look at any you look at real estate industry, and often you look at agents websites and bios, and they talk about service and everybody just loves me and I love my clients. He said, but if you go to the website of a major law firm, you're going to see 3 things addressed: experience, expertise, and results. So just think about, heaven forbid, but that any one of us were on trial for our life. Would we be looking for the attorney who was really friendly and happy and folksy and loved us? Or would we be looking for the attorney that was a high level, skilled negotiator who could perform under pressure and collaborate for the best outcome, right? And so I think, especially when buyers now are going to be very focused on, oh, I'm actually paying this fee, even if they're paying it through concessions, right? They're going to expect more than, oh, my friend who has their license never sold a house, but hey, they're free to me. No, they're not, right? So it's going to be interesting.
You just triggered a memory for me. I've had a business coach for a real long time, and his wife is someone I think you might know, or maybe just know of, from geography, not terribly far from you, Ray Wayne. And
Oh,
I don't know if you know
I
Ray.
actually used to coach Ray Wayne years ago, and
So
she worked with me at a different coaching company. So, yep, I know her. She's fabulous.
she's amazing. And I was going through this time where I was struggling to close listing appointments at the
Mhm.
table. And so her husband, Glenn, who's been my coach for a
Yep.
long time, Glenn said, "Hey, why don't you take a few calls with Ray?" And Ray really taught, I mean, she didn't call it negotiation,
Mhm.
but she taught me how to close listing appointments at such a high rate. And it really was a negotiation. And
Mhm.
I then was able to transfer the skill that she taught me there in negotiation into my negotiations with cross sale agents, obviously at the listing
Oh, sure.
table with my buyer clients. And I just found that it had so many applications. So when I think about the question I asked you a minute ago about these skills and why they're so critical, I think it's because also they apply in so many different parts of our business. Number one, so we can feed our families, we can give the best possible service and result, as which is the important thing there, the best possible result to our client that we've got a fiduciary to. And I just think that's so important.
Yeah, I think of it as chameleon like, which doesn't mean being fake or phony, but adapting. So for example, let's say we were flying to Paris today and we aren't French, we don't speak French. So, but we learn a few words, a few phrases, so that we can try to bridge that communication gap and speak their language. And some of your listeners are very familiar with the DISC assessment. And if you think about each of our personality styles, there's no right or wrong, but we each kind of roll how we roll if we're not aware of ourselves. So I'm a high D, 99D. If I'm working with a 99S, pretty opposite. very calm, quiet, very patient, little bit timid, and I come on strong the way I prefer to come on strong, we're going to have an immediate break and rapport. And persuasion is highly unlikely to occur when you do not have rapport.
Yeah, that is so, so true. Let me ask you this question, because I'm sure you've seen it. Otherwise, you wouldn't put together this course. What are some of the most common mistakes that real estate agents make during negotiations that you think need to be addressed?
I think not listening carefully, right? And we do even a session in the course on being an active listener, because there's the stated position, like I'm not paying a penny higher, or I won't go a penny less. Okay, is that a stated position or a real position? Well, how do we know? Well, by asking deeper questions. So there's a segment on how to ask awesome questions to clarify, and also really studying that puzzle of the motivation. So I think listening, or really listening, right, to understand what's underneath their true motivation. Also, I think it's just being sometimes kind of mean to each other. Like sometimes agents think with other agents, they have to take an aggressive or a rude, approach, and that's how they stand up for their client. When quite frankly, that kind of is the opposite, because then no one wants to work with you, or working with you becomes such a battle. So I feel like we don't listen enough and ask enough questions, and that we're not gracious in our spirit of communication and collaboration. And we're going to need to be.
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking about this the other day after meeting with my team for Power Up. We were talking a lot about the new rules and negotiation, and kind of how we would handle these negotiation, both on the listing side and on the buy side. And one of the things I thought about was, we're in such a interesting market right now where we don't really have a ton of inventory. We've got a little bit more than we had, but also demand is not real high.
Right.
So I started thinking about the applications of what if these new rules came into play, and it was the market of, like, say, mid 2020.
Mhm.
What's going to happen then when there's nothing on the market but demand is super high? Or what if it just goes back to, maybe it becomes a super crazy buyer's market again one day? We don't really have that right now. We have this weird mix. But I thought of the different ways we're going to have to sharpen our negotiation skills and our communication skills as the markets change and flow. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I guess I just thought in my mind, like you said, who knows? And it's always something. But what I've seen in terms of who really not just survives, but thrives, is they don't put their head in the sand and say, this is going to go away. They embrace what is, because whether we like it or not, it's what it is. They embrace it. They skill up to be ready for it. They really study their market and shine as that market expert. And, Kevin, my first year in real estate, fixed rates went to 18%. So I have sold through some pretty rugged times and pretty rugged markets, but there's always buyer and sellers who want to make deals. So I think it's as markets adjust, who's the now clients I should be focusing on and prospecting. I may have to follow up a little bit longer. I may have to carry more listings if fewer are selling quickly. So I just, I think it helped me that I started in a really terrible market. So I really don't fear markets that change.
Yeah.
I
Uh,
think it's just being quick to react to it.
I agree. I think the quick to react and kind of understand what's out there is probably the most important thing. I didn't have 18% interest rates, but I started off with short sales where I was negotiating with oftentimes two or three banks.
Sure.
and a buyer and a seller. And it was, it was absolutely a game of communication and telephone, if you will. And it was interesting for sure. And I think as long as you're willing to adapt and be real with what's going on in the marketplace, if you've got those skills, you're gonna be able to, like you said, not just survive but thrive through that. What what role do you think emotional intelligence plays in successful negotiations?
I think in a successful life and communication, emotional intelligence is huge. And that's one of the topics in the course. And I actually recommend to everyone, and we'll give you all the book info in the course, but buy the little book, Emotional Intelligence 2.0. And there's a very easy assessment, 10 minutes, super easy questions, and it will give you two scores. One is the score, which is your awareness of yourself and how who you are and how you communicate impacts others. The other score is what's your intuition like? Are you good at reading people and quickly adapting? And what's awesome about the book, Kevin, is if you don't like your score, if you think it's not high enough, they will actually recommend in the assessment what chapter or paragraph to read, what exercise to do, and then they give you the code to take it once again in 60 to 90 days after you have a chance to work on yourself. So life, negotiations, everything. The EQ matters, which has nothing to do with IQ. It's not at all anything to do with how smart you are. It's how well you communicate.
I think that's so important. I had a friend, Nina Patel, on the podcast not too long ago, maybe a few months ago, and that was our topic was EQ and how to really use that in our business and how to effectively be aware of it and improve on it where we can. And that book, of course, obviously came up because it's such a vital book on that topic. Um, I know we only got a few minutes left, so I'll leave you with a couple of last minute
Okay.
questions. Let me ask you this. What advice would you give to real estate agents who are maybe just starting out and they don't really have a background in negotiation? Because I always think about the new agent. Uh,
Mhm.
what an interesting time to be getting into the real estate industry.
Sure.
What advice do you have for that person, the newer real estate agent that's just starting out when it comes to their negotiation skills?
Well, I think an awesome option would be to find a mentor, right? So join a team, possibly. I think that's really a path many new agents are realizing. I can scrap it out on my own and make a lot of mistakes, and lose some deals, or I can join a team where my split may be a little different than if I were independent. But on the other hand, I have other opportunity and I have somebody who I can go to and say, okay, read this email with me. Think about this person and how do I approach them? And also can put them through some more extensive training. Because in a typical brokerage, they're trying to serve everybody, right? New, seasoned. Some brokerages are great with new agents. Some don't really want new agents. So if you end up there, they're like, hey, there's a desk, knock yourself out. So I think it's really thinking about where do I need to be where I can have that leader that can guide me and help me. But also, even more than that, when you're going to need a track record, right? Because they're going to pay you. They're going to want to know, what have you done? Why should I use you? But if you're part of a team or a brokerage or organization that has a strong brand in the market, you can say, we have done this. We have achieved this. I have a senior leader who can advise and jump in where it's needed. So it bridges that gap because it's like the chicken and the egg. Well, I don't have any like experience or credentials, but if nobody will give me a chance, how am I going to get that, right? And so sometimes that's by having that partner, mentor, leader that can help you bridge that gap.
Yeah, that's such a great answer. And Great advice. You mentioned it before. I will put the link into the show notes so everyone can see it.
Perfect.
Forwardcoaching.com/, I believe you can actually just go to the fast
Negotiations.
forward
Mhm.
courses and drop down for negotiations and you'll be able to get to it. But we will also put a link here in the show notes. Debbie, last question for you before we get going. Any other additional resources or thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience before we get going? Or anything else that you or Forward Coaching is up to that we can share with the audience?
Yeah, we're working on a virtual built how. We'll keep you posted on that. I'm trying to pin down a date because we want to get something out there to help everyone. But also, I think just don't panic, right? This will become normal to us one day. I think the key is study those new forms, get very comfortable in how you speak to them. Remember, a lot of your clients don't even know anything about this, quite frankly, or care that much. Some of them think it already happened months ago. So keep it simple. Don't throw a bunch of jargon. Don't tell them all about the origination. They don't care. They care about their goal. Tell them what they need to know. Go over those forms in a confident, matter of fact manner. Keep it as simple, clear, truthful as possible, and go help them buy and sell, right? That's all they want to do. They're still going to buy, they're still going to sell, and they're going to need great agents in the middle to help them overcome their fear and hesitation and achieve their goal.
So good. So well said. Debbie DeGrow, Forward Coaching, thank you so much for joining us again today. I really
You're
appreciate it.
welcome.
Looking
Have a
forward to
good day.
talking to you again. Have a good one.